Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, Episode 4, All the Mirrors of the World. This was definitely an episode packed full of a ton of different stuff. We got to see Lady Pole going to basically, the old house where Jonathan used to train with, well, I guess they aren't both magicians, but the one guy is still a magician since he didn't sign the paper, and the other guy isn't anymore. But we still get them, somehow they're just still in there. They always seem to just find a way to be in the show still. So we get to see Lady Pole go there. We get to see, at the end of the episode, the gentleman and Steven pulling this creature, which I believe you call like a mollusk or something like that, out of this water. It's basically a log, and then he drops the tears on it, which are somehow still in the handkerchief. And he basically makes a clone of Arabella. I believe it didn't look like her at all because it was like her face and she was covered and stuff. But I'm pretty sure it was a clone because he mentioned the stuff about it taking form. So he makes a clone of her, and his plan is to have Jonathan basically give Arabella's life away without him even knowing it. And based on the trailer for the next episode, he apparently accomplishes that with this clone, which seems like it would make it fairly easy because he wouldn't know that he's being targeted by the fairy. He has no idea. So I don't know how he's going to come across him, if he's actually going to see him, or if the gentleman is going to end up using sort of a middleman. Maybe he'll use Steven himself or something like that. I'm not sure. But we get to see him kind of enact his plan by the end of this episode. We also get to see our first actual look at the Raven King. And in this picture, the gentleman is in the background. He's sort of the right-hand man, or at least one of the high-ranking fairies within, the Raven King's, legion, I guess. So he's in that painting, and he's the only person. It's the Raven King, him, and then there's the woman in red with the two crows, or, well, I guess the ravens, two ravens in her hand. And I believe he had a horse, or maybe it was a wolf, I can't remember. But that was pretty much it. So we did get to see the Raven King. We really saw how important the gentleman is as far as his connection to the Raven King. And I guess it kind of blows my theory out of the water that he was the Raven King from the first episode. Or the second episode, sorry. But he's obviously still incredibly important. So we got to see that aspect of him. We got to see Jonathan perform yet another feat of magic where he goes through the mirror and he finds the King's roads, or the Raven's roads. So that was pretty interesting. We didn't get too much of that, but it was still pretty cool. And he travels, through the mirror, and I love the way they did that, where he was walking towards the guy who, they threw in it was another thing. They kind of had this little mystery going, like Jonathan. People are thinking that Jonathan is basically training them and sending them letters and stuff like that. And he's like, I'm not training anybody. I'm not getting any money from any people or anything like that. And so we find out in this episode that one of the guys who, the flashy guy who's always like, always, I'm trying to think of how he does it. He like exaggerates the pronunciation of everyone's names. We find out that he is actually in a lot of debt. And so he's been basically tricking people and taking money, saying that Jonathan would do this or do that. And so he gets busted in this episode, and that's when we find out about the debt. And his buddy kind of just throws him out. He just lets him go. Like, they were kind of a team in the beginning, where it's like they were both kind of working against Norrell, who we find out his name is Gilbert in this episode. So they were kind of a team in the beginning, and then in this episode, it's like he kind of turns on him. It's like, I'm trying to get this book done. I'm trying to get my name out there and stuff, and you're ruining everything. Not only with Jonathan, but definitely Norrell, who is kind of the higher of the two at this point. And so it's like he lets him go. He's like, take this to the officials, tell them these are the debts owed by this man, and this is where you can find them. And he just throws him under the bus, and it's hard to kind of side against him. I mean, I never really liked the guy in the beginning, because he was kind of douchey, to be totally honest. As far as I saw, that's just how I viewed him, at least. And I can't really be mad at him. And it's like, well, I mean, they both kind of were at one point, but it does seem like the guy now is actually working with Norrell. Although that was so he could get the book published because he wanted something for himself. And he was kind of crushed by the end with Jonathan as well, because Jonathan writes the review for the book. And this was the definitive episode where they do officially become enemies. And everything's been leading up to this, like Jonathan being the one who is clearly just the one who has the true magical power, and Norrell being the one who's learned it all, but still, he talks so much about how he wants to keep magic respectable and how he talks down about the Raven King and things like that. But he does close himself off to this grand world of magic, which Jonathan wants to learn and he wants to explore, and he wants to walk the king's roads and learn all these different types of magic and do all these different insane, crazy little things. And this was the episode where they really break apart. And I love the ending for this episode. And we got to see the scene in the trailer where Mr. Norrell does mention, like, we have to destroy him before he destroys us. And it's official. He was talking about Jonathan, because I was wondering, maybe he was talking about the Raven King based on the destiny that was kind of given out in episode 2, I believe, where the Raven King is meant to come back, and I believe he's supposed to destroy both magicians and basically regain all of his power. So I was like, well, maybe the trailer is about, Norrell talking about the Raven King, but he was actually talking about Jonathan, so they are officially enemies. Jonathan is, unfortunately, he made the decision to not even practice magic by the end of this episode and just become a theoretical magician. And he gets sucked into the war because Napoleon is taking France. So he's been pulled in. He leaves in 3 hours. So he's going to be put out, back in the face of war, which obviously we heard him mention a lot. And I love the little argument they had, him and Arabella. And it's like, I know you've been to the peninsula. You say it all the time. And then the conversation he had was like, I've been to the peninsula, and he had to stop himself when he's talking to Norrell. So I love that little bit. And I think it'll be different this time, because then it was like he's practicing his magic. He already saw someone die with someone he was close to, and of course he lost the books, but that wasn't that big of a deal. But now he's going back out after he's decided not, that he doesn't want to do this anymore. Not only does he not want to fight, use magic to fight the war, he doesn't want to use magic in general. He wants to put what he knows into a book and be done with it, and that's it. Maybe learn some stuff and then just put that in a book and not practice it. But it's going to be a different aspect compared to him trying to figure things out and help the war. He doesn't want to do it at all. So it'll be really cool to see how that takes place and how he acts very differently. And apparently something happens where he mistakenly killed a guy, or at least they think he does. And I watched the preview like a couple of different times when he did that really cool trick with the mud, and he was about to get killed, and like the giant mud arm comes up and grabs the guy. So I can't wait to see that full scene, even if that is it. Although I think it's a bit more to it, like he's gonna do something there and escape, I guess. But that's gonna kind of make him a traitor to the crown, basically. So that should be pretty exciting, and I'm really excited to see how this official split between them continues from this episode on. I mean, with the gentleman tricking Jonathan into giving away Arabella's life, we have that. Lady Pole in the preview was trying to tell the magician, tell Jonathan Strange not to take the deal. So she learns that, the stranger or the gentleman is trying to do that. So I'm excited. I think it'll be really cool. It was actually one of my favorite things in this episode was something else Jonathan did was with the King of England. And, he's doing this spell and he's trying to learn. I thought he was going to summon the gentleman in this episode and he'd actually see him and get to talk to him and stuff. But he does this spell. The gentleman is kind of, I can't say he's pulled in or summoned because I guess he fights against it. But it was the same sounds, and that's why I thought that he was coming, because, it's the same noises. It looked, whenever someone lights a candle, I always assume it's the spell to summon him. And so like the king, starts talking, and then he just walks into a mirror, and I was like, I'm like, oh man, he just really messed up, because the King of England just vanished. He's just gone. He's lost in the mirrors. I thought it was going to be like with the paper where it was the reflection in the mirror and he'd just be stuck in there forever. But then we have the part where, we find out that the gentleman took him to where Stephen was going to be, and he puts the sword, this really long sword in his hand, and he's trying to fulfill the destiny of having Stephen become king, and that's taken away from him, and it just makes him even madder at Jonathan. So that was just another great little moment. I just love that spell. I thought it was pretty cool. It's just like he's trying to save the king and stuff, and it's just like he does a random spell, and he just walks into a mirror and vanishes out of nowhere. Fortunately, though, he does end up saving Jonathan does end up saving him, and he brings him back in the nick of time. But it was a great episode. I did love, as usual, I love the spells that Jonathan did, and I love the fact that Norrell, especially in this episode, I just kept thinking like he's just becoming the villain of this series. Like he wants to do this. He talks about keeping magic respectable, but it's like he just doesn't realize how bad he's becoming. Trying to continue down this same path over and over again. So I love the way that played out. Childermass went to see Lady Pole because Norrell isn't giving him any information, and he mentioned that he would come back, and they have their little argument in the beginning where he's like he used the magic to, in the square and stuff like that. The magician that was there, we got to actually see him talk about the roses in Stephen and Lady Pole's mouth, which I thought was pretty cool because that kind of gave him a moment a little bit like Childermass in the last episode where he has this inkling for magic. Like he can see magical things happening, and it shows that he actually has this prowess that's growing a little bit compared to what he knew before when he, didn't really have any magic. Much like in the episode when he met Jonathan, where he passed out, and he basically went into Jonathan's dream, and he saw the lady that was summoned. So it was kind of cool to get that from his character because they really took the time to show that he understands magic and can basically see things that others can, and he doesn't know what it is, and he didn't see the gentleman at the door, but he at least saw the roses in their mouths, and he said it was plain as day for him. So I really liked that moment. And we also saw fortunately, I guess I should have mentioned this at like the very beginning, Childermass lived, so that was a really good moment. When they showed where he was shot, I was like, oh, he's going to be fine, because I thought it definitely looked like he was shot like right in the heart. But he does survive, minus a finger. I believe that was the symbolism. At first I was like, why is he putting up 3 fingers like that? And I was like, oh, I'm pretty sure it's because one of his, when he was wrestling with Lady Pole, the finger was shot off. So he now, has one finger gone. And when he was dying, he basically ended up in the afterlife or sort of in purgatory somewhere. And the tree that he was near looked just like the tree that was at the end of the episode. I believe it was the same tree where the little pond was, where they found the mollusk or mouse, whatever it was called. So I believe they did that on purpose just to show its true connection to the power of the Raven King. Because like a raven basically just flew out of nowhere from behind Childermass before he like woke up. So that was definitely a cool little scene. I'm glad he didn't die, of course. So, and now that he's kind of in this odd position where Norrell won't tell him certain things, he has to figure stuff out for himself while he's trying to get info out of Lady Pole and stuff like that. So I'm excited for where the characters are going. I do believe we only have a couple more episodes left, unfortunately. I think this is like maybe a 6-part, possibly 8 parts. I hope it's 8 parts. But I think it's actually only 6 parts long, so either way, we don't really have that much more to go. We're either halfway through or more than halfway through. But I like this episode, of course. I want to know what you guys thought about it, so please comment below. Let me know your favorite parts, least favorite parts. And I think the big question for this right now is, since we officially have the split between Jonathan and Norrell, I definitely want to know who you guys side with. Like, which team are you on? Would you side with Jonathan or would you side with Norrell? Because personally, I'd have to side with Jonathan. I think most people would. He was sort of the everyday type of character. He's the one you really relate to, where it's just like you want to just learn, when it's something exciting, at least you want to just learn and get involved and discover things that have been just for whatever reason locked away for hundreds of years. And it's very dangerous, and they do have to question why it's suddenly back. So that just kind of propels the prophecy of the Raven King returning and stuff like that, which is really cool. But I'd have to side with Jonathan because there's so much out there that, even with it being bad magic, there's just so much that there's, you'd have to assume at least there's so much more good to be found as well. But I definitely enjoyed it. I love the ending scene where we hear the initial plan and everything. I thought that was really well done too, where I was like, initially the plan was to threaten Jonathan, like, if you don't do this, we'll talk about what happened in the war and how you brought these people back. Um, we'll ban you from magic and all this other stuff. And it was just like, that was their plan, but Norrell was like, no, I basically did the opposite, and it still didn't work. So, that's what led him to say, like, we have to destroy him before he destroys us. And I feel like he's just coming from an odd position that's not really evil, like good versus evil. It's just him feeling that he has to keep magic in this tiny little bubble. And that's a terrible shape for a bubble, but he's trying to keep magic in this tiny little bubble, and that's kind of why I feel like I have to side with Jonathan, who's just trying to expand magic rather than keep it respectable, which is just like, this is what we know, that's it. And, little tricks like the mirror stuff, and that's really it. Like little, really parlor tricks, which he would be really mad if someone called him that, but that's kind of what he's trying to do. And aside from what he did with Lady Pole, which of course he doesn't want it to get out that he kind of screwed that up because it wouldn't be respected as much. So I definitely side with Jonathan for his, at this point, just noble intentions of genuinely trying to learn and expand magic. But like I said, I want to know what you guys thought about this episode, as well as the question I placed on you guys. So please comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.